cloud. Everybody's going to get a notification. We're now recording. It's going to be okay. And let's do this. Boom, chicka boom. All righty. Oh, for those who don't know me, I'm Father James Reiss.
The incredible James Reiss.
No, you give your name.
I had to do that. And I'm Judy Wohrle.
And we'll be presenting on the first part of our three-part series that Deacon Claire had put together, Listen, Learn, and Love, how being present changes lives. And this is our first session of 3, and we hope that you join us for our continuing sessions in the next few weeks. Our moderator this evening is the impeccable, the glorious, the freaking deacon, Claire Miss. So a combination of us being able to give you some of the meat of our situation here for our session 1. Deacon Claire is going to be leading us in some discerning questions that we can moderate to think about and meditate on as we're presenting.
The first session is on listen, why we leave. And so I wanted to ask Father James and Judy, from your experience being in Nogales in Arizona, why do people leave their homes and their homeland?
Well, the first thing we want to do, since this is the listening portion, we wanted to ask all of you why you have ever moved from your homes, and we will be listening. So if anyone has any thing to share with us, why have you ever moved from your home?
I don't need it.
For a better
Yes. Oh, for a better opportunity.
Deacon Claire will come around with the microphone so that people on Zoom can hear us.
With my parents and to care for them.
To have more bedrooms.
More bedrooms.
I moved from Savannah back to New York because my grandson was born.
Because you were for a job and a better life.
Yeah, when you speak into the mic, it helps the people on Zoom hear you.
To get out of New York City back in the 70s when the city was really going downhill.
Just speak into it. It's
Okay. For better opportunities, get educated. You know, when I came here and I saw multiple choice, true, false questions and tests, I could not believe it. I was in heaven. So I came from Jamaica and I'm very, very happy. There's success here, really.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Okay, so these sound like they're all good things. Our lives will become much, much better. I want you to think about what you have heard in the media from other people, maybe in your community, as to why the immigrants are moving here. So just keep some of those thoughts in your head. We found from listening to all of them, they leave mostly for survival. Every reason they gave us pointed to survival. They were escaping violence. They were escaping poverty, climate change. Some areas had drought, some areas were flooded with hurricanes, food insecurity, and a lack of economic opportunities. So some of the same things that we spoke about tonight, but mostly it was to be able to live and survive.
So the vehicle that we're using to get to talk about our experiences here is what we started off with this evening in the church, Stations of the Cross. So our first station was Jesus is condemned, that we read inside. Jesus is condemned to death. Now, Judy is going to share in a little while some of the narratives that people had experienced down in Nogales. And we heard the primary reasons of why people are leaving their homes. There's two: they have a choice, and the second, they don't have a choice. The first one, having the choice, thinking about the people who had the opportunity to go for a better life, to be taking their children for job opportunities. I heard somebody say that was some of the experience, but a majority of the experience was those who are escaping from violence, poverty, food insecurity, lack of economic opportunities. And this really ties into our first station of Jesus being condemned to death. I'm looking over I have what we just used in the church moments ago. Jesus is condemned. Christ speaks, though Pilate is unjust, he is the lawful governor and he has power over me. Think about all the people down at the border who are trying to escape their governor, not their legal governor, but the governor of the cartels, who threaten, and as Father Chavez said on Sunday, territory comes from the root word terror, of a ruling king or sovereign who terrorized a nation into being part of their community. So people are terrified, people are afraid, and that they are running for their lives. And that was the majority of the experiences that we witnessed and heard, that we were listening to when people told us their stories.
It's funny because I thought the same thing from the stations tonight, where Jesus is speaking and he is saying that Pilate has power over me, just like these cartels had power over the migrants and forced them to leave. They were powerless.
Right. Oh, I think we covered this. All right, we'll move right along.
I just want to point out, in this particular drawing by a 5-year-old, just to point out the violence, if you look at the bottom where you see the red, he drew someone killing someone else. And this is from a 5-year-old. So this just gives you an idea of the violence that even the children are feeling and seeing and living with. And this is why it was so important for the families to just leave.
So the second station we're going to be addressing this evening is Jesus is forced to carry his cross.
So what were some of the experiences that we heard from the Revoluciones?
This group, Los Revoluciones, they had formed so that they could get their story out to people and be heard and perhaps have their story spread. We spoke to them at the Kino shelter, and there were maybe 4 speakers. And their testimonies were so moving, and some of them were just hysterically crying while they were speaking to us. And they had escaped that violence, but it was still with them. The first person that spoke told of his family of 15, his parents, his brothers and sisters, his nieces and nephews. They owned a ranch, and the cartel came in and wanted protection money from them. And the father said, "I'm not paying it." And they came back and threatened, and they all had to leave, all 15 of them, and just escape, leave everything behind, their ranch, their livelihood, everything. They went to another town, and the cartel started spreading rumors that the father had murdered someone. And again, they had to leave. So now they were waiting in Nogales to try and get to the state of Washington, where they had family and sponsors. So they were applying for asylum. Another story was,
Just in case you think like you hear one of these stories, like each one of them was more horrific than the next. and brace yourselves. The man who worked for the government, he was kind of like the local, how would I say, the local principality. He was the local mayor, and he told a story about how the cartel came and offered his little portion of the city protection. And he said, no, thank you. I've got this. I'm okay here. He was a really hands-on man. He had his own farm, his own ranch, and the cartel then went off and kidnapped one of his children. And then they went back the next day and offered, would you like now our protection? And the gentleman, being so convicted, was trying his hardest to stay strong. He went to the local governor of that region and he said, I need help here. The cartel is trying to terrorize me, and that they kidnapped my oldest son. The response from the governor was, I'll take care of this. Don't worry, you can go home. That night, the cartel was waiting for him at home. The governor was in cahoots with the cartel, and this is a constant fear of the people down there. And he was forced to leave the duly elected area that he was in and move to Nogales from southern Mexico for his family's safety. Claire, do you
Did he get his son back?
at the time that he had spoken to us, he was still missing, and it had been over a year.
Just this Saturday, we heard from Father Chavez about the 13-year-old boy that he saw at one of the shelters. And the boy saw the cartel kill his father and his uncle, and then forced the 13-year-old to bury them, dig the grave and bury them. There was another story of a girl who really started this revolution group, and she was raised by her grandparents in Mexico. Her parents had come to the United States. While they were in the United States, they divorced, but they both returned to Mexico when she was 15. When they returned to Mexico, she met her half-brothers. Her father was kidnapped by the cartel, and her brother, who she was just starting a relationship with, was murdered by the cartel.
The last story I'll share, because I believe you're getting a very clear picture of this. There was a mother who got off the bus and was offered a package by the cartel to bring to a disclosed location, and just don't ask anything about it. And she refused and said, no, thank you, and walked on her merry way. This woman had a routine. And so the next day, the same woman got off the bus at the same stop, and the cartel was there with a picture of her 4-year-old daughter. And she had to run home in terror to find, to her relief, that her daughter was at home. But she packed up her family that night and they moved to Nogales seeking asylum. And because of it is not a political entity, they cannot seek political asylum in the United States. They do not qualify because the cartel is not a recognized lawful body of government. To relate this back to the second station, Jesus takes his cross. We read inside just a little over an hour ago, the crosses you bear are largely products of your daily life, the discomfort of all kinds. We put out into discomfort. It was their cross to pack up their things physically, to take up their belongings and truck their way, sometimes over the cover of night and without water and food and shelter, proper shelter. They had to make their way to the border, and that was them taking up their cross. And when we think of that metaphorically, but this is actually quite literally them carrying their belongings for their family's safety.
Two, they're also carrying the memory of everything that has happened to them. which is a much greater burden, something that we will never get rid of.
The third station, Jesus falls for the first time.
So, Father James and Judy, what traumas and obstacles were experienced by the migrant during the journey?
Well, again, I'm going to throw this back to you. When you were moving, what obstacles or problems did you run into?
We were moving from upstate New York with a camper trailer, and somehow we ended up on the Taconic Parkway. And the traffic was all over the place, and we were just like horrified. We had no idea because we came from way upstate New York, and this was now New York. Anyone else? Oh, Jan.
Deciding what to bring and what to leave behind when moving to a new place. That was a challenge.
When I moved back from Savannah, I had 6 cats and not easy to find a place to stay with 6 cats. So we slept in the car.
I can tell you a funny story. When my husband and I moved from one house in Bayville to another, we had the closing on the one that we were buying first. So we really didn't have the money for it. And then we had the closing for the house that we were selling next. So our attorney had to say to the seller's attorney, don't cash that check yet. Nothing has cleared. So it's always a struggle when working with banks.
I was living in Northport before Huntington, and I was living on church property at Trinity Episcopal. One of the gifts of getting to live downtown, it was beautiful, but having the expiration date creeping closer and knowing the prices were ever growing so higher, trying to find a place within a certain amount of time, and then working full time. I was over at St. John's Episcopal Hospital doing what we call in the church world CPE, clinical pastoral education. So I was doing about 40 hours a week in East Rockaway, out in on the border of Nassau County, and commuting back and forth on a daily basis, trying to move. That was really complicated, trying to work and move at the same time.
This is an example of a friend that was moving. They had sold their house and they're moving into a new house, and it was supposed to be ready. But after they closed, there was a problem in the house. So they ended up moving into our basement, a couple and their 4 children and their dog. And they got stuck where they were. They just couldn't get to where they wanted to go. And I think they ended up spending 8 weeks in our house because they had no control over it. They just had no control over getting out of where they were.
Now,
One more.
Actually, a very different answer. No problems whatsoever.
Very
But again,
lucky.
unlike the migrants, I had freedom of movement. I had every ability to go where I wanted.
Thank you for that segue. Anyone else?
Oh, yes.
You know, I was homeless, but didn't realize I was homeless. Looking back now, I end up going to work with my suitcase in a car and going to a motel come night to sleep. Looking back now, I laugh, it's funny. I was homeless twice. Because I came here from Maryland with a girl who said she was coming to visit her friend in Brooklyn. And I said, Madge, I'm going with you. And then I realized, I said, oh my God, I have no way. I had to call this friend I know in Long Island. And she said, come. I said, came out here. I got the job, but it was a housekeeping job. I really couldn't cook the American way of cooking. But anyway, I got a job with the state, but have nowhere to sleep come night. So I went to work with my suitcase. But everything worked out for me. Everything worked out. I got a room the next day, 2 days later, I had my own room. And I just couldn't go anywhere without knowing I have a job to go back to come evening or a place to sleep. I had to make certain I'm working and a place to sleep. So in 1969, I wanted to go home. I was desperate. I was longing for home, Jamaica. And then I said, wait till everybody return from vacation and ask for 3 weeks. But I make certain days I have that room to stay. And I was working and getting a car. So I did go home and come back. But I was homeless twice.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, some of the traumas and obstacles you can't even imagine. Some you can, some you can't. First of all, they just left everything behind. Imagine walking out of your house with just the clothes on your back and maybe a backpack. They left their family in some cases, their friends, their possessions. Another was not knowing where they would find shelter or food, where they were going, medical care, clothing, more clothing, not knowing how long the journey would take and how long it would take them to apply for asylum, not knowing how they would support themselves, and language, of course, and most important, not being found by the cartels who are tracking them down and who could kidnap or kill them and their family members. So that was one of the biggest fears and obstacles.
One of the things we kept hearing over and over again was how their faith sustained them while they were waiting. And this is when the missioners from St. John's had their jaws dropped in humility, that their biggest gratitude was saying, gracias a Dios, thanks be to God, that they were in such a strong place of, I know the old Episcopal poster from the 1930s and 40s, and it said, welcome the migrant. And it was the picture of Joseph and Mary on the back of a camel, pregnant and walking towards the city. And that really, it struck me how faith-stricken these people were, that this is what they relied on. One of the Sunday I was there in Nogales, I got the opportunity to celebrate Eucharist, Holy Communion for, and you saw a picture in the video. I couldn't put it in the slideshow, but all the kids gathered around the altar and to celebrate and sing songs in Spanish, songs of praise. There was, we were listening, the third station, the Christ speaks, if you would be my other self, you must also accept without complaints. There was no complaints from those people of God. Just praise God that they were alive and well and in this safe space. The parent that just sticks out of my mind is the mother who came up to me, and I was taken aback that she was kneeling down for Holy Communion and bowed her head and put her hands above her head to receive. And I just didn't know what to do. I was stunned for a moment that she had such reverence for the Eucharist, for Holy Communion, for that community gathered there. And I asked her about her upbringing, and she said, I grew up in the church, and this is the way that I worship my King, and he's gotten me through it all.
Here is some proof and pictures of some of the obstacles. The one picture of the bunk beds from one of the shelters, so they were all living in one big room. An embroidery of that one of the migrants did on each side of the wall, and the different obstacles they met there. The obstacle in the desert and having to survive the desert or not. The wall itself and the poverty of the whole area. So if they had to go out and find jobs while they were waiting for asylum, it was almost impossible. because of all the poverty. And here are some of the drawings of what did you leave behind by the children. They left their animals, their pets, their homes, their cars, and just their beautiful countries that they loved.
The tie-in for that third station, the migrants fall, just as Jesus did physically. They fell, they left their baggage. Ken spoke in our video this evening that we watched that they found backpacks. How eerie just to hear nothing but the wind and to see human backpacks just there on the ground. And they're like, I can't carry this any further. They must have fallen. They were tired, dehydrated.
To flee.
They were carrying their burdens physically, the crosses of their life and their families' lives. The fourth station, Jesus meets his mother.
When James and I were speaking about this presentation, when I saw this, I originally thought, although helpless to take this burden from Jesus, Mary showed compassion and tried to comfort her son, an obvious connection with this station. But in speaking today, I said from the point of view of a mother, and I'll be inclusive and include fathers in this too. And after listening to all these stories, it is unimaginable of what these mothers and fathers went through and the sacrifices that they made for their children to keep them safe as immigrants. Most touching was those crosses in the desert. One of them was a 16-year-old boy. So some of these parents never ever find out, never hear from their children again, and don't know what happened to them. But yet the children and the families had such love that the children's left their families to try and get a better life for them. And the mothers let them go. And the heartbreak of those mothers who let their children go and never heard from them again is just unbelievable.
This night is about listening. We're telling stories for you to listen to and really take in for your reflection. When we sat silently in those rooms where we were being told these stories by the migrants who were looking to come into this country, whether it was the woman and the stories that Judy and I were telling earlier, we were sitting in a room at the Kino Initiative, a border initiative. We had to sit silently in a liminal space, awkward and uncomfortable, because most of us had not gone through anything as close to what they were going through. We couldn't say, I hear you, or that I get where you're coming from. We had to sit there uncomfortably and just be there. And that's part of Deacon Claire's mission plan for us to listen, to learn, and to love.
I just want to say, I think that was enough. As uncomfortable as it might have been for us, when the whole session ended, everyone just hugged. And I think they were grateful for just us being there and listening to them.
The amount of tears that flowed from us, we did not speak the same language. Luckily, we had a translator, a Jesuit priest, who was really helping counter the stories that we were listening to in Spanish, and he translated for us. And we sat there, jaw dropped, and the gift of presence, it was a sacrifice, a holy gift. Like we offer the sacrifice of the Mass or the sacrifice of the Holy Eucharist. It means holy gift. And it was a gift for us to be there, to sit, to listen to these stories so we could come back to our space. And just as Father Chavez came here, that we could share these stories with you all. As we prepare for the next portion of our talks, I'm going to ask in a moment if anyone has any questions, because we have about a little over 5 minutes left. But there's two stations here that we're just going to name. Simon of Cyrene is made to carry the cross, and Veronica wipes Jesus's face. And these two are where we hear about our learning and loving. And this is really prepping us for next week's program. Well, we'll hear from Jan Stebbins, our video director and master producer over there, and also Kaylee Sievers, to give an account of how they learned by their witness, by being present. But just as strangers helped Jesus in some way on his journey, strangers are called to come to the aid of migrants. And this isn't a political issue that we're trying to push here, folks. We're just trying to love our neighbor as God has loved us.
So stay tuned. That's what we're telling you. And see the incredible work that some of these strangers are doing at the border.
At this time, Deacon Claire is going to come around with the microphone. If anybody has any questions or closing comments, we have about 6 minutes left with our evening.
Also, perhaps there are people on Zoom that might have questions but anyone in the room, a comment, a thought, or a question? Yeah, sure.
I
am just so happy that I had the opportunity to hear this and to listen to all of the it was just amazing to listen to all of the time that you spent there and all of your feelings about it, and we know quite a bit here, but nothing like what you had to tell us. So thank you so much, and we certainly appreciate it. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to be able to share it with you.
Thank you, Mary. MJ, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious if there's anywhere I can buy some of this art that you guys were talking about.
So Sister Lika is the nun that we saw presented. These were actually purchased by the missioners that went on this journey. So, and feel free to please take a look, all those gathered here, and those who are on Zoom, please ask Deacon Claire or myself. We'll be happy to share the photos that we brought back, the artwork from Sister Lika. She made this all herself.
She painted all these.
And these are just copies of
incredible.
her original art.
This is an incredible picture
Mm-hmm.
of,
And
yeah. Yeah. I'm sure we can find out.
Maybe Father Chavez or Sister Lika, we can maybe get in touch with them and find out.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jan. Jan? I know she's carrying well, but they can't hear her on Zoom.
So these borderos are sewn by women on who are waiting to cross for asylum or ask for asylum, and the money stays with them, right? So this church is buying them up and paying them, and then the church resells them and passes along any additional money they get. So these, I believe, can be purchased online. We'll look into it, and maybe Claire can circulate the information. I kind of remember
This bordero, I got at Casa de la Misericordia, and it was made by someone who stayed at the La Casa. And what they do is they put their name on the back, and when each of their bordaderos are sold, they get a portion of the money to help them for their journey. So it's a nice way for them to make money. Yes.
Deacon Claire, they're being requested online, so can we show them right here on this screen? Spotlight. All right. Lovely, isn't it?
I learned how to make these in the sewing area at La Casa de la Misericordia. So they learned how to do this. Some of them, many of them may have known this skill for many, many years, but some of them are taught, and this gives them a way to earn a living. You'll see more of these later in the presentations that we do later.
Some of them were found in the desert. They were so important to the families, and they took them with them, but they were found in the desert.
Hello, thank you very much, Mary Beth Dieterle. I appreciate you calling me out on that. When they left, they would join these sanctuaries. The actual there was problems with people who wanted to go out and get jobs. They wanted to be able to fund themselves some money before they get to their next location. But the problem is, if they leave, that puts the sanctuary at risk. There's a risk of drugs coming in, a risk of influence of money from the outside world. So when they say they'll move into the sanctuary, whether it's Casa or Kino, they promise and that they will not be leaving. So they are sacrificing a holy gift again for their family and for their own lives, that they will not leave.
I don't, yeah, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't it a point where they had to stay until they were ready for their asylum, and then Sister Lika would take them to the border with whatever paperwork they had? But getting to that point, they had to stay in. Weeks, months, yeah.
Yeah, just more of a comment, more on the Bordondos. So the organization at Grace St. Paul that collects them and sells them, it's artisansbeyondborders.org. So if you're interested in learning more about that, and I think there's links on their site to the different like online places where they're selling. Artisan Beyond Borders.
I actually have their book with me tonight, but I thought we might put out more of our resources in the future at our future presentations.
About 5 years ago, because of the situation that we're looking at, I began to research more and more about it in preparation of writing a book for kids for the first time in my life. And the reason I said it to you is when I started this research, the estimates from the UN was there were 24 million refugees around the world. Today, that figure is almost 35 million. So, so thank you for this session tonight. Thank you.
Is there any security in these sanctuaries? Do they have any guards, or what's to prevent the cartel from going in?
We felt like we felt like we were in prison, you know, that we were really locked into those facilities. But what about the dogs?
Well, they did have dogs, but a lot of the sanctuary spaces, because I'm recognizing we're at time, and we'll make this the last question. We'll close out in prayer with Deacon Claire. The sanctuary space was an open place for children to come and get breakfast. They knew this place as the convent where the nuns would take care of the littlest of the members of the community. They could have breakfast and lunch, homework help after school. It's only recently in the last decade or so that it's turned into a sanctuary space for migrants. This was a care center for people in need. So they usually leave the nuns alone. I'm glad to hear that there's that little bit of respect that's left. So they remember that space as, okay, don't hurt the people that work there. Whatever issues I've got with the people who are living inside there, they're not jumping the fences, but they do have really tall, like 10-foot fences with barbed wire around the top. And there is 2 male figures that are always guarding the gate. And so the gate, it takes at least 1 man to open the whole gate, and it's not an automatic drive, push the button, garage door open. Yep, the huge steel wall. And they have 2 people, they take shifts every 3 hours, 4 hours. And this is how some of the men who are really feeling like they're struggling because they can't do anything. A lot of the women are working in the kitchen, providing meals for the community. And a lot of the men are doing some of the security work and guarding the facility.
And the dogs. But it's interesting because people, like Father James said, it was a comedor. It was a place where people in the community could go and get meals, like a soup kitchen. So when they closed it off to become a sanctuary, there was a decent rapport between the town and this particular shelter, and they all respect Sister Lika. So you felt really safe there. But interestingly enough, it was, people within the shelter who are there seeking sanctuary were actually doing a lot of the work to sustain and keep the facility running. They would do the laundry, they would make our meals, and they were guarding the door. Is there anything else? There's nothing else. Okay, Jan.
So for next week, we're going to actually take a little bit of a different approach. We're going to be looking at all the experiences from seeing the wall to the first time to encountering the desert for the first time. And we're going to talk about it from both perspectives. So our perspective as missioners, and then what we learned about the migrants' perspective. So you'll see a sort of a direct juxtaposition of really the 2 different worlds we're living in. So please come back.
And I really would like to thank Father James and Judy for putting together this amazing presentation. Thank you very much. And Jan Stebbins once again put together the PowerPoint that we're using to sort of guide us through this. But we all worked together when we spent an evening at Paula's home. Paula made us a meal that was reminiscent of our experience in Mexico. And we had a chance to really talk and pray and think about what this all meant for us and to ponder how we might present it to all of you. So I think this group of people has been just an amazing gift to me personally. So as we pray, I would like to thank God. Thank you, God, for the gift of family, for the gift of friends, for the gift of this community. Thank you for offering us an opportunity to widen our view of the world, to realize that even as we stand on this piece of ground, on this fragile earth, that we're all on the same earth together. Help us to understand why we have borders and to be willing to learn, to listen deeply, and to learn and to love. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray.